Released in 1997 for Microsoft Windows and developed and published by LucasArts. It's Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. Much like its predecessor, Jedi Knight is a first-person shooter set within the Star Wars universe. The game takes place 1 year after Return of the Jedi. You again control Kyle Katarn, who is looking for his father's killer. This eventually leads him to his father's estate, where he finds a message from his father, urging him to become a Jedi Knight. Kyle and his partner Jan then set off on a mission to stop the Dark Jedi Jarek, who is looking for the Valley of a Jedi, a mystical place with high force power concentration. But is the game any good? Let's find out with the good. The movement and overall controls in Jedi Knight are much improved over its predecessor. Long gone are the days of Kyle's movements being slippery, imprecise, and floaty. In Jedi Knight, it's responsive, snappy, and quick. Also new is mouse look for the Y-axis. This is incredibly important because this game has more platforming segments than the last game. Factor that into the fact that levels are also large and incredibly vertical, you need to be able to see your feet in those situations. Thankfully, the mouse look works perfectly and helps the shooting feel a lot better too. The weaponry in Jedi Knight has also seen an overhaul. Each weapon has its own specialized use. For instance, the Stormtrooper Standard Issue E11 blaster is inaccurate but fires very quickly, so it's good for clearing out rooms at close range. But the Wookiee Bowcaster is slow, but it's very accurate for picking off enemies from afar. Weapons now fire tangible projectiles rather than instant contact hit scan bullets. The retooled weapons, along with better movement speed and better controls, all factor into the game feeling more like Doom, which is interesting considering the previous game in the series visually looks more like Doom than this one. Another important addition to Jedi Knight is the lightsaber. It's an absolute blast running around with this thing slicing up stormtroopers. There's even some nice dismemberment. Thankfully, the lightsaber isn't incredibly overpowered. While Kyle does have the ability to reflect blaster bullets back at the stormtroopers firing them, it's not completely overpowered as many shots do slip through. On top of that, Kyle can't deflect back very large bullets from turrets or other such vehicles, so it's important to keep other weapons on hand for those situations. Now, while a lightsaber is cool and all, it's not the only defining characteristic of a Jedi Knight. The Force is also a key factor in that, and Kyle does have the ability to use the Force. After completing a level, you are given Force Stars. These stars can be used to acquire or upgrade Force powers. These come in 3 flavors: neutral, light, and dark. These Force powers allow for an absolutely great time to be had, and depending on if you choose more light side or dark side Force powers, your playstyle can vary greatly. But seriously, pulling a gun out of a stormtrooper's hands and leaving him defenseless before you chop him down never gets old. The game's story is fairly decent, the writing isn't completely terrible, and it's decently fun to watch these FMV cutscenes. Some of these cutscenes are even an upward of 4 minutes. Some of the performances in the cutscenes are absolutely brilliant. The guy who plays Jarek is an absolute joy to watch on the screen. He reminds me a lot of Ian McDiarmid's role as the Emperor in Episode 3, where he's just so silly and hamming it up so much that it's just a blast to watch and have fun with.
Excellent, Katan. You've started your journey to the dark side. But that is not enough!
Looks like I can't bail you out of trouble this time.
Strike her down and realize your true destiny as a Dark Jedi, your true power! No. A pity. Then you will die.
A couple of scenes in the story will change depending on if you choose light or dark side Force powers, along with how you interact with NPCs in-game. I very much enjoyed this karma system as it was based solely on the player's actions, and thus felt very organic. The game soundtrack is mostly comprised of John Williams' classic Star Wars score, and that's great. It's always a blast to listen to, and I love hearing it. But as great as all these things are, not all good. So it's time to talk about the bad. The large, open, expansive levels in Jedi Knight are one of the game's greatest strengths, but also one of its greatest weaknesses. It's incredibly easy to get lost or stuck in these levels, and it can become quite frustrating backtracking your whole way through, scouring every little corner for one switch you have to flip, and then running around trying to figure out what that opened or turned on. It's not incredibly terrible because there's a decent map system in the game, but it's something notably bad. The game also expects you to take these crazy leaps of faith. Many times you come to a cliff or bottomless pit, and the game expects you to think you should jump down there. Sometimes, it's the way you're supposed to go. Other times, it's just a bottomless pit, and it's very hard to gauge what the game wants you to do. Giving the player the option between a first-person camera and a third-person camera is usually great. In Jedi Knight, however, it's implemented pretty poorly. In third person, there is no reticle for your guns. Although it can make saber combat helpful, without the ability to actually aim your weapons accurately, it seems pretty useless. And my biggest problem with the game is that it's ugly as sin. It suffers from terrible level of detail effects. It's extremely polygonal and has muddy textures even for its time. The game supports 16:9 aspect ratios and modern widescreen resolutions, but as you can see from the footage, the HUD doesn't even scale properly. There's a plethora of problems on modern GPUs, and you need to install various patches and fixes to play the game on both the Steam releases and good old games releases. Personally, I had to install a Voodoo graphics card emulator to get the game even to run. Once I started running the game, it had no music, and I needed to install another patch to get any music to play. Overall, Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2 is a fantastic Star Wars game, and on top of that, it's a fantastic video game. It does everything a sequel should do by improving on all elements of its predecessor, and it also included new things and took the series in a new direction. Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2 gets a slip and slide out of 10. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for another Infinite Backlog review.